A two-state solution proposed last night by U.S. President Trump took the world by storm. Everybody was in absolute shock. I mean, I was at a comedy show last night with Modi, and when I came out and I see the news sent by you, Rob, sent something about Trump proposes to take over Gaza, I thought that was part of the comedy skit. I'm like, I didn't realize. And then I'm seeing it's all over the place. President Trump wants to actually take over Gaza, and he says he wants to buy it.
Buy it and own it.
He wants to buy it and own it. This is not a temporary thing.
And then renovate.
So it's a permanent acquisition. Does this mean that Gaza becomes the 51st state, or is it a territory like Guam? Which one? Rob, do you have any more details on that? Would it be a 51st state or a territory like Guam?
He just says
Puerto Rico.
Buy it and own it.
Buy it and own it. Okay, fine. So interesting. This is a very interesting concept. And the question we're going to ask ourselves today is, we'd like to discuss today, is what does the Torah have to say about this proposal? Supposedly, we were opposed to a two-state solution for 50 years since it was proposed after the Six-Day War. We've been vehemently opposed. And now suddenly, you're going to tell me that, are you suddenly, Rabbi, in favor of a two-state solution just because it's not our enemies, it's our friends? You know where Trump got this idea from about taking over Gaza for without paying for it? He said somebody else is going to pay for it, right? You know where he got this idea from? You know where he got the idea? He was going to take over Gaza without paying for it. For a year and a half, he's seen signs everywhere about free Palestine. Okay? No, it's what it says. It says free Palestine, right? It's like Palestine for free. Okay, no problem. We're coming in. We're bundling a casino and a golf course. Maybe next year's with tariffs, right? So the question, folks, is, how do you feel about it? I want you to post your comments here, guys. I want you to post your comments, my online viewers. Let me know how you feel about this two-state solution between United States and Israel in Gaza. Now, it's kind of interesting. Let me just develop the thought over here as we work through this and we fight it out a little bit in this Farbrengen. So for starters, I love how the biggest problem is in Gaza actually became the solution. You know, we've been learning about this idea in Chassidus, in the Maimer that we've been learning about Hanukkah, how the greatest dysfunction is not your problem. The greatest dysfunction in your life is not your problem, it's your assignment. We've been learning about this concept over and over from every which angle in Jewish spirituality, where we look at our deficits as opportunities instead of focusing, for example, remember the wounded IDF soldiers, the Rebbe refused to call them the handicapped soldiers, as they were called at that time in Israel. He insisted on calling them the excellent, exceptional soldiers. And the Rebbe said, there's a fairness doctrine at play here. That God is always fair with his creations. And if he's going to deficit one of your talents, it means that he's going to give you a surplus elsewhere. So if he takes away a leg or an eye, it means that he's giving you an extra talent of empathy, of sympathy, of oratory, of sewing, of cooking, of playing the piano. Why should I focus on your deficit, calling you handicapped, if I can, for the same price, focus on your surplus, which is given to you because of the surplus, because of the deficit, right? So your problem is actually your solution. I love the fact how within this proposal that I'm just getting to become a little bit familiar with, the fact that Gaza is riddled with explosives is the reason why he's going to do this. This is my understanding, that because it's so full of explosives in every bedroom and under every kitchen table, there's either a tunnel or a rocket or an RPG or a tank or something else, right? Therefore, the place is uninhabitable. And we're going to use that problem as a solution. We're going to have to clear out all the residents, tear down all the buildings, rebuild all over again. I think that's a very interesting approach of looking at life from that perspective. But the question really is, what does the Torah have to say about this proposal? That's what I want to go to today, right? I think that essentially there's two questions at play. There's two questions at play. The first question is the two-state solution. The two-state solution, the new two-state solution, which is the U.S.-Israel two-state solution. Is that a problem? Are we opposed to having a two-state solution ever, in every case? Or is it specific to the Palestinians? I don't want to use that word Palestinians. Are these people really Palestinians?
No.
It's a made-up term. What are they? What are they, Arab nomads?
Jordanians is a made-up
The Jordanians? Yeah, Jordanians is a recent term as well. What are they? Yeah, but Jordan was a country invented only 75 years ago, right?
They're traveling
So they're Arabs. Let's just call them Arabs.
They're occupied.
They're Arabs.
They're occupied.
Okay, fine. Let's call them Arabs. So is it only that we're opposed to Arabs being in Gaza, or are we opposed to anybody that's not Jewish, anybody that's not part of Israel? That's the first question. A second question is there maybe the first question should rather be: is Gaza, and this is a question that Andy brought up last night, is Gaza part of the sovereign homeland, the biblical homeland, in which case we might have a problem with giving it up?
Start from there.
Oh, you opened the book for me. I couldn't even put this here. Okay, so where am I looking here? I'm in the portion of Lech Lecha, right? Okay, what are you showing me?
Down in the middle.
This is the promise to Abraham. We're looking at the promise to Abraham. This is the covenant of the parts. Okay.
And then the description.
Oh, there's the borders of the land here. Okay, let's see. Oh, here it is. On that day, after making we're in the portion of Lech Lecha, the third portion of the Torah. God is making a deal with Abraham. It's very interesting. One of the first things God tells Abraham is the borders of the future land. Isn't that interesting? Because he figured that in 2025 it would become an issue. On that day, after making the furnace and torch pass between the animal halves and the covenant of the parts, God made a covenant with Abraham, saying, the first thing he says, to your descendants, I have given this land, from the Egyptian river. Ooh, the Nile. Well, it says Wadi El Arish. I mean, this is parentheses. What's Wadi El Arish? Is that the Egyptian name for Nile? I don't know. Anyways, to the Euphrates, folks. You don't have, you got to tell this to the United Nations. We got to propose. By the way, there's something we've got to tell you at the United Nations. Actually, it's from the Nile to the Euphrates, which, since it is now serving one of the greater borders of the Promised Land, can be termed the Great River. The Promised Land comprises the territories of the Canaanites, the Kenizzites, and the Cadmonites, which I understand to be Syria, Lebanon, and Jordan, which will be in the future occupied by the Ammonites, Moabites, and Edomites. The Hittites, the Perizzites, the Rephaim. Okay, fine.
And then it has the map showing where those.
Okay, the map, is a recent invention here, but
it
the
shows
map
where
would,
they are.
yeah, it would go all the way from the Nile to the Euphrates. I mean, it's from Egypt to Iraq. Okay, so now that's the biblical command. Bear in mind, that is, when it says Keni, Knizi, and Kadmoni, there are 7. Joshua and Moses went out to conquer the 7 nations of the land of Israel, but the Keni, Knizi, and Kadmoni are the extra 3. So there's actually 10 nations that occupy the biblical promised land, but so greater Israel is the 10 nations from the Euphrates to the Nile. That's greater Israel. That is what we're going to occupy, what we're going to own when Mashiach comes. And I'll explain to you in a moment why. The 7 nations is the much smaller borders from somewhere in the Sinai area, maybe from the Suez Canal until the Golan Heights. Okay, but the rest of it is the expanded territories, which we will only get when Mashiach comes. And I'll explain to you why. You'll remember we learned the discourse of how when Joshua conquered the Promised Land, when he sent spies to conquer the Promised Land, we call it the garments of the soul. That was that discourse we learned. In that discourse, the Rabbi explains like this, that the conquest of the land is not just a geographic, it's actually a psychological, it's true on a psychological plane as well. And the 7 nations and the 3 nations represent the 7 emotions of our soul and the 3 intellectual parts of our soul. Remember, Tanya teaches us that our soul is made up of wisdom and feelings. 3 parts of wisdom: inspiration, understanding, and realization, and then the 7 emotions, right? So during this time of exile, we are able to take control over, in that discourse that Rabbi talks about, it would take over Jericho, which is really the garments of the soul. Every one of us has the capacity to take control over their thought, speech, and action. The righteous amongst us, the tzaddikim, are able to conquer the 7 nations, which is Israel from the Golan to Suez, but only when Mashiach will come. In Tanya, there's 3 kinds of Jews: the tzaddik, the rasha, and the beinoni. The successful Jew, the struggling Jew, and the failing Jew, right? Those 3, their greatest aspiration is to be able to conquer their 7 emotions. But none of them are able to conquer their 3 intellectual capacities. Whatever that means, we don't even know what that means because Tanya doesn't even go into it. That will happen only when Mashiach comes.
How about Reuven
So that's an interesting point, is that Reuven, Gad, and half the tribe of Manasseh, in the biblical narrative, actually requested that their land be on the other side of the Jordan River, which would be in these lands. That's an interesting question. I'm not sure if I know the answer to that, what that would represent on a psychological plane. I don't know. Anyways, I just want to get into some clarification here. So, are you allowed to give away a piece of the promised land to anybody? Andy was suggesting last night that maybe Gaza is not part of the promised land. I'm not so sure about that. I don't know. I don't think so. I think it is. I think it is. Now, remember, this is very early thoughts over here because these details are just emerging and nobody really knows what Trump even means. Who actually is going to pay for the construction of Gaza, by the way? Is it going to be Saudi Arabia? Is it going to be Qatar? If Qatar is going to be paying for the construction of Gaza, it might not be so cool, right? That might be a problem. If the new Syria is paying for it, or if, Turkey, that could be a major problem. So we don't really know. But let's come with some assumptions. Let's assume that America is taking over Gaza. Let's talk about America. Are we allowed to give away Gaza to America? There is a prohibition in the Torah to sell real estate to non-Jews.
What about leasing?
But isn't there also?
Is this a lease or is it a sale?
Well,
no.
Let's assume it's a sale because I believe he said the word permanent.
Rabbi,
Can we?
Doesn't the Torah say that once you've conquered land, you never cede it back?
If you own a house in Israel, you're not allowed to sell it to a non-Jew. Do you know that? Let me explain to you how this works. There's a law in Israel, in a biblical law called the law of the sabbatical. The sabbatical year, the law of the Shemitah. Okay? Shemitah means that every 7th year, you have to stop working the land. You're not allowed to work the land. So if you're a farmer, can you imagine the degree of faith and trust, bitachon, emunah and bitachon, trust, that's going to take for you to shut down your business, like just leave your field open so anybody can go into it. In the 7th year, you go study Torah a whole year, right? And you trust in God that God will provide your needs, right? So a lot of people are afraid of doing that. This is really a test of faith that God says, right. I'm testing your mettle if you're worthy of the land. Whenever the Jewish people abandoned this law and disregarded it, we lost the land. The land vomited us out, quote unquote, from the Bible. Okay, the land vomited us out because we don't deserve the promised land if we don't know how to treat the promised land. Right? When we did observe the sabbatical law, that's when we were able to live in the land. It's a promise in the Torah. But so today, there are big signs in Israel. It says, this farmer observes the sabbatical law. And then there are farms that don't. This is when we Jews, observant Jews, do reverse, we do the BDS movement in Israel. The boycott, divest, and sanction movement. We don't buy produce from Jewish farmers that were farmed during the sabbatical year in violation of the Torah. We will only buy it from Arab farmers. Why? Because you're not allowed to eat the fruit. It's treif. It's worse than pig. When you eat the fruit that was farmed by a Jew in violation of the sabbatical year. Now, how do you get around it? There is an interesting loophole that someone came up with.
Of course.
The loophole was to sell. It's called a heter mechira. A heter mechira, which means a permission to sell. It's like a heter iska. Exactly right. It's exactly like the heter iska, which was you're not allowed to lend a Jew money on interest. So they made a deal that's like an interesting. You walk into a bank in Israel and there's a certificate in the wall that says we don't lend money to anybody. We only do shared profit agreements. So it's like a little bit of a loophole that says, because they realized that nobody was lending money. This is in the days of Hillel. They came up with this heter iska. So
it's partnership.
It's similar to selling chametz. Thank you, Rabbi Dovid. It's like selling chametz. Exactly right. So what are you supposed to do on Pesach? You got to burn down your factory, your vodka factory, because you're not allowed to own it. So what do? Is you sell it to a Gentile. You sell it to a Gentile.
For 1 year.
No, for 8 days. For the duration of Pesach. And therefore, I don't own any chametz. It's his. Right? And my vodka cabinet, in my house, is protected because
you can sell your farm for a year.
Oh, well, there's a problem. Selling your chametz to a Gentile during the 8 days of Pesach is no problem. What you really do is you're selling it to the rabbi, by the way, and the rabbi then sells it to the Gentile. Just that's how it works. But anyways, there's no problem with selling your vodka cabinet or your vodka factory or your pasta factory to a Gentile during Pesach. However, selling your land in Israel to a Gentile during the year of Shemitah, I don't own the land. I sold it to a Gentile. He doesn't have to observe the Shemitah year, and he's allowed to farm the land during the sabbatical year. Now there's a problem because it says in the Torah, one of the 613 prohibitions is leisachanim. You're not allowed to show them grace. You're not allowed to give real estate to a non-Jew in Israel. You're not allowed to sell a real estate to a non-Jew in Israel. There's different interpretations of how to interpret this law. It's not so simple at how to interpret what leisachanim actually means. One of the interpretations is that you're not allowed to sell land. Now, this is not a racist thing. It's the same way that in America, you can't be president if you weren't born here. Right? Is that racist against people that weren't born in America? It's not. It's just that we want to maintain the integrity of the country. by only having somebody that was actually born here who's allowed to be president. In the same way, if we start selling off real estate to other nations, what's going to happen? Sooner than later, you might find out that you've been bought out of your own country. I mean, what's China doing with all the ports? And you heard about the Panama Canal?
Yeah.
Right. So, all right. So I just want to point out in answer, there's an Israeli canal. Oh, that's interesting. You know what? Maybe Trump is after the canal.
Seriously.
Maybe that's what he wants to call it, the America Canal.
By the way, that's not far-fetched. They've actually had
Not a bad idea, you know. Anyway,
They have designs for the canal.
for which canal?
The Israeli. It's
What,
called
to
the
go-
Ben Gurion Canal.
To go from Eilat to
It's called the Ben
from
Gurion
the
Canal.
other
It
tip
goes
of-
through Gaza.
Okay, very interesting.
They're
So just like they have the
actually-
Suez Canal, they have a different one.
They're actually planned.
The Houthis are gonna love it. Okay, good, fantastic. So, so
That's why it wants Gaza. Put the canal.
you know,
through Gaza.
I can't wait to find out what Trump has to say about the Houthis. You know, there's this Trump presidency. It's like exhilarating and unnerving at the same time. He said that last night. I gotta watch the press conference. I was busy with a good comedian last night.
He said that he's increasing the bombing.
Oh, and the Houthis.
Yeah.
Oh,
He
okay.
said because they're interfering with international.
Of course. Okay, back to the story here, folks. I want to get to my two questions. Remember, the two questions are we allowed to give away land in Israel? And the second question is there a problem with a two-state solution in Israel with someone that's not Arab, like America? Okay, fine. So the first answer I want to say is like this, folks. Okay. First answer I want to say is that there is a problem with selling land to non-Jews in Israel. Yeah, there's a problem. Yeah. According to that interpretation. And therefore, you would not be allowed to do the sabbatical year loophole. The- He wants to sell it to Kushner. I love that. Interesting. Okay. A Yiddish cup. Okay. So let's focus here, guys. Let's keep a focus here for a second. Let's focus here a second. So according to this interpretation, you would not allowed to be doing the sabbatical year loophole, which means when you were in Israel and during the sabbatical year or after it, you got to look at the kosher certification of the product and say, it's got to say kosher. This product was not farmed during the sabbatical year. Some of them will say this is kosher through a heter mechira, through a sale, a purchase agreement to a non-Jew. Now, I personally don't eat such foods in Israel that was sold through a sabbatical agreement for this exact reason, because you're not allowed to sell land to non-Jews in Israel.
We were there in the sabbatical.
That's right. It was very hard finding a
They were
falafel.
So hungry.
It was very hard finding a falafel because if you stand at a regular stand, you know, normally tomatoes and cucumbers are kosher. But in Israel, during the sabbatical year, they're the most treif thing if they were farmed by a Jew. Okay, now back to business. Okay. So in other words, this would technically be a problem. However, the problem is Israel selling Gaza to someone? Israel already gave Gaza 18 years ago, turning it into the hellhole that it became when they unilaterally disengaged with the most insane violation of Torah in 2005, when Ariel Sharon was going to show the world how amazing we are and how committed we are to a two-state solution. That went over well. Won us a lot of friends, right? Free Palestine, they still say, right? We gave you a two-state solution. Gaza today is owned by the Arabs. Gaza is owned by Hamas today. Oh, you don't think so?
You can't.
You can't. You're saying there's no such thing.
Basic rule of real estate law is you cannot give something that you don't own.
They
couldn't give it away.
Oh, so you're saying the Jews never owned it in the first place? It belongs to God.
No, they have no. That's right.
No, it's not that it belongs to God. It belongs to the collective of the Jewish people.
Right. It wasn't.
And therefore, who are you to give it away?
It wasn't for Sharon of the Israeli
Okay,
government
look,
to give it away.
but Rob, I just want to say on a practical level, I don't think there's any conversation whatsoever. I wish there was. Look, I think that the one thing that the Arabs are afraid of, the one thing that Hamas is afraid of is losing land. That's it. They're not afraid of dying, but they're afraid of losing land. That's my interpretation. And if Israel was to say to them, first of all, we're going to kill all the prisoners. We're not keeping any prisoners so that they don't have any bargaining chips. If Israel had a policy, we execute execute prisoners, we don't let them live, then there would be no incentive for hostage capturing hostages. But also, if Israel would say we're moving into Gaza, I think that would be the best solution. I agree. However, since that's not happening, you've not heard that conversation ever about Israel taking back Gaza. So right now, what's the status quo? It's a hellhole. It is it's a viper's nest right now. So is it a better solution? Is Israel really giving it away? I don't think so. I don't think Israel's giving it away. I think that Israel doesn't have the right to give away Gaza right now because the whole world is going to scream and cry. It's going to be interesting to see how the world reacts to Trump's proposal. I mean, why suddenly if Trump wants to take it over, is that going to work? Unless they say it's not safe. You can't live there. It's full of explosives. Everybody's going to be blowing up on every street corner. And therefore you created your own grave and now you got to get out of here. Everywhere. Exactly. From Israel. Absolutely.
The question is, once it says it's going to take 10 to 15 years to clean it out.
And they'll never want to come back then.
No. But then the question is, who goes there?
Right. Okay, that's an interesting question. I don't know the answer to this, but I want to say this. So to summarize, if Israel was to take over Gaza, I think it's the best case scenario. Yes. However, I don't think it's going to happen because of international pressure. Therefore, what I think is going to happen if, again, this is a Torah perspective, my Torah perspective, my interpretation of the Torah perspective, to be clear, okay? So I think if Trump was to take it over, if the United States was to take over Gaza, I think that it would not be a violation of selling biblical land of Israel, because it's not ours right now we don't have control over it. That's what I think right now. I might be wrong. I'm telling you what I think.
We don't have a deed to sell it to America.
We don't even have, exactly, it belongs to the Palestinians, to the Arabs right now, exactly.
No.
Not.
You're still combining
So who
Torah-
owns Gaza right now,
you're
according to you,
still
Andy?
Combining Torah law with international law. From an international law point of view,
I'm speaking
Egypt-
practically, yeah,
Egypt attacked.
okay.
Egypt lost, and Egypt didn't want Gaza back. Therefore, Egypt has it by international law. Pay attention to Dr. Gautier.
Yeah.
He explained it very well.
Good, go ahead.
And for the same reason, they have the so-called West Bank, Samaria and Judea, because they were attacked by.
And what are you saying? Who owns Gaza? Who owns Gaza? According to you. Israel.
Because they
Israel owns Gaza right
they
now.
Owned it fair and square.
So you're saying right now Israel owns Gaza? Is that what you're saying?
And the West Bank.
Look,
And the West Bank.
by the way, did you see that Hamas was not happy? Did you see this? This is like comedy now. Hamas comes out last night with the declaration. They say they're opposed to Trump's proposal because it's a violation of international law. Suddenly they discovered international law. Now their lawyers, the Hamas legal team, Hamas has discovered that there's such a thing called international law. This is like oh right, international law. We forgot about that one, right? Okay. Look, I want to move on because I don't want to get stuck in this. I'm suggesting right now, okay, that Gaza is right now a loose cannonball, and therefore it's not in the hands of Israel. You could argue with me on that. Fine, I'm okay with you arguing with me on that. But my interpretation is I don't think it is, and therefore for America to take it over, it's not Israel giving it away. Number one. But I want to go to the main issue over here. The main issue, which is the two-state solution. Are you allowed to? Are we ideologically opposed to having a two-state solution, or only having Arabs on our border? I want to make it clear that the former position to say that we're opposed to a two-state solution ever is not based on promised land considerations. It's based on security considerations. The opposition to a two-state solution is not because of the holiness of the land of Israel. It is a practical law in the code of Jewish law. I'm going to share with you right now. It's a practical law in the code, which is explicit, and the Rebbe would quote this endless times, which has everything to do with safety and security. That's it. I'm going to quote to you now from the Code of Jewish Law. It's Simon Shin Chav Tes. It's section 329. Section 329 of the Code of Jewish Law, paragraph 6. If non-Jews besiege Jewish cities, if their goal is monetary, we do not desecrate the Shabbat to protect ourselves. Shabbat is one of the highest ideals, right? Only human life is above Shabbos, right? So if they besiege us for monetary ideals, we're not allowed to break Shabbos. But if they come to kill, or with no presented reason, we fear the worst. We go out with weapons and we desecrate the Shabbos and we battle them. And we proactively violate the Shabbos. We don't wait for them to attack first to fire the first bullet. In a city near the border, however, this is the but. If it's a city near the border, even if they just come to plunder straw or hay, not just economical interests, they want to just take our straw or hay, we initiate a military offensive, even if this entails desecrating the Shabbos. Which means like this law has got nothing to do with the land of Israel. It would apply if we were living in Madagascar, if we were living in Greenland, or if we were living in Palm Beach Gardens, where enemies wanted to move next door to us. Enemies wanted to move next door to us to besiege us. And these enemies were besieging us, and they came to plunder straw or hay, right? Again, it's a siege. It's not any neighbors. It's not saying, ha, you think you're going to move next door to me? Oh no, we're coming out with the military. We're not opposed to neighbors. We don't have a problem with having neighbors. That's not the problem. The problem is having hostile neighbors whose intention is to hurt us. When that happens, again, not only in the land of Israel, but anywhere in the world, then the Code of Jewish Law in 329, paragraph 6 states that we have to violate the Shabbos proactively in order to do everything we can in order to protect ourselves. Therefore, applying it to the current reality, when Israel's neighbors, Gaza is certainly a border city, right? When Israel's neighbors are in their charter declaring to wipe out not just every Jew in Israel, but every Jew in the world, right? God forbid, right? When they have stated that intention and they continue to publicly state it and they're not embarrassed to admit it all the time, right? Then we have to do everything we can to disarm them, to uproot them, and to get them out of there. Now, what happens when our friends in America say, we want to turn this into the Dubai of the middle of Israel? We want to turn this into the Singapore that it was supposed to be in 2005. So and how are we going to do that? Not by giving ownership to the Arabs, because we've tried that before and it failed. I'm pretty sure Trump said that last night. Yeah. Not by actually saying, Arabs, come, we're going to give you your own state. We tried that in Afghanistan. We tried that in Iraq, right? No. This is going to be a U.S. territory. And this, again, is my assumption of what Trump meant. I think he meant it's going to be a U.S.-owned territory. Whether they have voting rights or not, I'm sure they probably won't have voting rights, but it's going to be like Puerto Rico, where it's governed by the United States. It's our country. And now you don't have the problem of Hamas digging tunnels, Hamas terrorizing the population, Hamas forcing people to do whatever they do in order to manipulate them. No, it's governed by the United States. It's policed by the United States, right? We don't even know who's going to live there yet, which is a huge question. It's a huge question. Who's going to live there? Is Trump's thinking now that Saudi Arabia is going to pay for this? And somehow he's going to make peace with Israel and Saudi Arabia by bringing in the Saudis? Is Riyadh going to be next door to Gaza Strip, in the Gaza Strip now? Because if that's the case, not so sure that's a good thing, right? So obviously the details of the deal are very, very, very important. It's critical to know what the details of the devil's in the details, but let's assume that it's going to be United States and it's going to be a Puerto Rico. If that's the case, then there is no security concern that I can think of which would preclude the consideration of a two-state solution with America. If it's truly America, I don't see how this would be in conflict. Because, by the way, I want to add you one more thing.
Where do the people go?
Well, his plan is to send it to Indonesia or Jordan or something, or Egypt. I don't know. I don't know the answer to those questions. I'm not on the cabinet. I wish I was, but I'm not. Okay. So I want to just add one more thing. I'm going to bring you a quote here from Rabbi Yitzchak ben Moshe of Vienna. Rabbi Yitzchak ben Moshe of Vienna was born in 1180, passed away in 1250. He was one of the German Tosafists, which is the commentaries in the Talmud. He wrote the following commentary on this Code of Jewish Law, on 329, when it talks about the neighbors besieging. Here's what he said. He gives us the reason for the law. He explains the motivation behind the law. Halacha views, Jewish law views the city alongside the border differently. Why? For fear that if the enemy conquers it, it will become a launching pad that will allow them to conquer the entire land with greater ease. The motivation behind that law, the why of that law, is because we're afraid that they're going to use that as the launching pad to conquer the entire land. So we're afraid of them conquering us. Are we afraid that America is going to conquer Israel? I don't think so. I don't think we're afraid of America conquering Israel. Okay, interesting question. But look, theoretically, I don't know. Rabbi Lubin, what do you think? Do you have any comment on this?
I think we need to be very careful because our administrations change every 4 years. And the American ideal of owning this land can be given away tomorrow to people we don't like by a president with the careful.
So Louis Farrakhan could be elected president. Is Louis Farrakhan born in America? Could he be elected president tomorrow? Right? Could that happen? If that happens, we've got some major problems on our hands. And therefore, with Rabbi Lubin's insertion here, you could argue and say, well, then it would be a problem to have a two-state solution with America.
Yeah, but what if if it doesn't even go that far, not where you have an administration that wants to conquer, but you are now taking land that was designated for the Jews, and what if you put casinos there? If you put whorehouses there? If you put other things that are, don't align with Jewish values? They're not an enemy, but you have these terrible things that are on.
Okay, so you're asking now from a spiritual perspective. I don't think that Trump's casino in Gaza is going to be worse than what's going on in Gaza right now, because right now it's a death cult murder factory,
But it's
right?
It's not a relative analysis.
I think the relative analysis is to the status quo. I think it is a relative analysis to the status quo, because right now, if there is a ceasefire deal, if this hostage deal becomes a ceasefire deal, which I'm praying that it isn't, right? Because the Torah tells us, by the way, that you're never allowed to agree to a ceasefire. And I want to just share that with you as well. I want to give you a proof of that. It says in Deuteronomy, it says, when you besiege a city for many days to wage war against it, to capture it, besiege the city that makes war with you until its submission.
Right.
You're not allowed, according to the Torah, you're not allowed to make a deal with the enemy. You have to vanquish them until full surrender. I got to obliterate them. Because if you don't do that, then they're going to rearm. And we've seen that all the time. And they admit it.
But that's what Trump's doing. This is all Trump throwing something out. What I personally think he's trying to do here, he's saying, we're going to take this over, these people got to go, which is when the ceasefire ends, I think they've made a deal where Israel can go in and just finish the job off. But in order to
You think that when the ceasefire deal ends, what does that mean? When is the ceasefire deal? You mean the hostage deal?
the deal, whatever this deal is.
Then Israel can finish, get as many hostages as we can, and then finish them off.
That's what I think he's doing by throwing this out.
Look,
there and saying,
I want to address the elephant in the room. Really, I want to just address the elephant in the room because there's a lot of considerations here and a lot of moving parts. I don't think any one of us is able to say yes, this is a good deal, or no, it's a bad deal. We don't know enough about it. But I think that the one thing I want to mention over here is certainly Trump is an interesting character, and you got to give him credit. You got to give him credit for thinking out of the box. You know, you got to give him credit for thinking out of the box and saying that the definition of insanity is trying the same thing over and expecting different results. We've tried this two-state solution idiocy for 50 years now, and it's only resulted in increased terror and emboldening terrorist organizations. Now, I think that the elephant in the room here is Trump as the savior, because I think that there are people that think that Trump is God's gift to the world or mankind or America. And therefore, if this is his idea, we trust him, it's going to be amazing. And as Jews, we never do that. The mistake of the Jewish people during the Purim story. In the Purim story, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai asked the question. He was either asked or was asked the question in the Talmud. Why were the Jewish people worthy of annihilation or the threat of annihilation in the Purim story? Why would God have allowed the Jewish people to be subject to come so close to the precipice of genocide in the Purim story? And the answer that either he gave or received was that the reason is because they enjoyed the feast of Achashverosh. They enjoyed the feast of Achashverosh. Now, the Rebbe asked the question, well, what's wrong with enjoying the feast of Achashverosh? It's not like the food wasn't even kosher. I mean, even if the food was not kosher, that's not justification for genocide.
They were getting seduced.
Right? The food actually happened to be kosher. So what was the problem? The problem is, like Harvey says, the problem was that they were seduced by the allure of power. They went to this feast of Achashverosh, which celebrated the death of Judaism, the death of the Jewish God, really. It was, remember, Achashverosh at that feast was bringing out the holy items from the holy temple, and he was celebrating the non-fulfillment, according to his erroneous calculation, of the 70-year prophecy of rebuilding of Jerusalem by Jeremiah. He was celebrating the end of the 70-year period when Jeremiah had prophesied that Jerusalem would be rebuilt. According to his erroneous calculations, that time had passed, and now Judaism was never going to rise up again, and this is the death of the Jewish people. So why did the Jewish people attend such a feast? Because they said, what's the big deal if we don't have Jerusalem, if we don't have our temple? We've got friends in the White House. We've got friends in the superpower of the world. We have friends in President and King Ahasuerus. We have friends in President Trump. That approach is idolatrous. That approach is saying we're not afraid of losing our national identity because we trust in the leader of the world. That is the definition of idolatry, of bowing down to a mortal flesh and blood, to physical being. And because we turned our backs on God, the Rabbi explains, that's the reason why they were worthy of genocide. You turn your back on God, then God turns his back on you. And what happens if God turns his back on you? Then you're left with two wolves and a sheep trying to figure out what to have for dinner by majority vote, right? That's what's going to happen, right? So that's why they ended up with a proposed genocide. We need to learn the lessons of our history. In those days and in these days, the miracles happen, just like God made miracles for us back then in the Purim story. When we learned at the 11th hour our mistake, and we realized through Esther's leadership that instead of putting our trust in Achashverosh, we needed to put our trust in Hashem. When they did the teshuvah, when they fasted for 3 days, it was then that they turned their hearts back to God, and God was then able to save them. Same thing over here today. Let us not make the mistake and say, we just discovered the Messiah. President Trump is the be-all and end-all. He's going to solve all of our problems. He's going to bring peace to the Middle East. We trust him. He knows what he's doing. That is idolatry, folks. We trust only in God Almighty. We trust in God Almighty, and we hope that God will make the President of the United States his agent, because it becomes very uncomfortable when the President of the United States is hostile to the Jewish people. But we hope that he's going to be the appropriate agent to manifest the will of God, to bring peace not only to the Jewish people, but peace to the Arabs. We need to free Palestine from Hamas. We need to free the Arabs from these murdering terrorists, from these highwaymen that are ruining their lives and forcing them into submission. Do you think all the Arabs want to be hosting rockets under their children's baby cribs? I'm going to assume that they don't necessarily want to. But if they speak out, they'll be executed. They'll be shot in public, as you see all these videos that are coming out. This is what they thrive on. We need to free the Arabs from their own tyrannical leadership. And we hope and pray that Hashem will bring shalom to the entire world. That's the prayer for peace. That's the prayer for Mashiach. That not only Jews, but Gentiles also will be able to live side by side in peace and brotherhood, without having any tyrannical highwaymen running the show anywhere, and by uprooting the Hamas leadership, by uprooting the Hezbollah leadership, by showing terrorist organizations, you give us October 7th, you will be obliterated into Pearl Harbor. No, you gave us Pearl Harbor. You're going to get some form of a, yeah. Well, your organization will dissipate, will be disbanded. If that's what's going to happen, then we put our trust in God. We don't put our trust in mortals. We're friendly with the president, and we do everything we can to support the president, but don't trust in a mortal human being. That is idolatry. And I think the president of the United States also is a religious man, from what I understand. He's a religious man.
Well, he sells Bibles.
He sells Bibles. No, and you know what? He went to pray at the Rebbe's Ohel. He went to the Rebbe's Ohel.
And then he wanted to sign.
I love it. He wanted to sign. I wish I was there, and he offered me to sign the prayer book that he prayed from. Let me tell you, that would have been an awesome fundraiser for any Chabad that would have had the signature of the president with a photo of the president there at the Rebbe's Ohel. So he's a religious man, and I believe that the president of the United States also doesn't believe in worshiping idols, and he believes in God, and he wants us also to believe in God, because remember this, the world has no respect for Jews who don't respect themselves. The world has every respect for Jews who do respect themselves. The world wants to see us believing in God. The world doesn't want to see us selling ourselves short by eating non-kosher because we're buying friendships, by violating our values and principles because we're garnering the world's sympathy or attention. No. The world wants to see Jews that are proud, Jews that are strong, Jews that are fearless and unafraid. And when we can have such a strong faith, it's then that we're applying the most amazing recipe for success, the mechanism that we need to unlock, to unleash God's blessing. Trust in God and invest in the medium. Believe that the medium is nothing more than a medium, but invest in the medium. Just like a farmer, what does he do? He prays to God, but then he plants the seeds, right? He doesn't just pray to God, and he doesn't just plant the seeds. He prays to God. He believes in the life of the world, and he plants, and the sequence is key. It doesn't say he plants and then he prays. It says he prays and then he plants. right? First, we got to come in with a solid rock, unshakable foundation of trust in God Almighty. When we come with that solid rock foundation, we say, okay, now how are we going to secure the blessing? Well, if you want to make money, get a job so God can bless your job. If you want to win a war, then get an army so God can bless your army. If you want to win the court case, then get a lawyer, a good lawyer, an expensive lawyer that would be most likely for God's blessing to go through him. And if you want to make peace in the Middle East, then find the best candidate to be elected for prime minister, for president of the United States of America. Get him in a good alliance with the prime minister of Israel, and let's hope and pray to God Almighty that he will be the agent, the angel of God, to be able to bring peace and stability to the region, to the world. And that would be the most amazing legacy for President Trump. If he was truly able to say that he truly brought peace to the Middle East, that would be an amazing legacy for him to be able to bring. It would be an amazing legacy for the world. We hope and pray that we will see peace for all human beings very, very, very soon.
His goal is to cleanse Gaza of Hamas. And the only way he envisions being able to do that is to remove all the Arabs, rebuild it, and then get rid of Hamas. That's his plan.
It's also simpler than that. If you think as a developer, any project I build, if there was an unexploded ordnance, first you get title to it. Once you get title to it, clear out everybody. Nobody goes in there.
That's his plan.
Then you.
All right, folks, I'm going to wrap it up over here. I want to say thank you to all of our online viewers. Let's hope and pray for peace in the Middle East. It's going to be amazing. I just want to finish with one story about the Jew who was praying at the Western Wall every day for 50 years since 1967, since the reconquest of Jerusalem. And CNN comes to do an interview after 50 years, and they say to him, "Is it true you're praying every day at the wall?" He says, "Yeah, 3 times a day." "What do you pray for?" He says, "I pray for peace in the Middle East." And how do you feel after 50 years of praying for peace in the Middle East? I feel like I'm talking to a wall. Well, let's hope and pray that that's just a joke. But truly now we might hope and pray to actually find peace in the Middle East.